Welcome to SQL City. I'm Steve Jones, and we're going to talk about monitoring today. This is trying to be a little bit of fun here. We're going to base this a little bit on our DBA Team articles. Has anybody read DBA Team? Good, good. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It's got a little bit of fun. A very simple, quick agenda here. Who am I? And then we're going to try to avoid the worst days you can have as a DBA. How many of you are DBAs? Like you have to manage, get paid your right. How many developers or something else? Yeah. You guys cause all these problems. I'm kidding. Alright, so who am I? I'm Steve Jones. I founded SQL Server Central about 15 years ago with a few partners, and it's been my full-time job for a long time, over a decade now. And I've worked with SQL Server though since 1991, so I've been doing this stuff primarily as a DBA, though I have been a developer as well for 25 years through all the different versions of SQL Server. Here's my blog. Twitter is probably actually the best way to find me if you need me. And then please feel free to send email if you want, or send an email to Redgate and somebody can get it. Grant's speakers are coming. Okay. All right. It's Carly's fault for those of you in the background. She is sorry though. She's trying hard. All right. So what's a bad day for DBA? Is it a day maybe where you get surprised by something going wrong? The developer deploys something, didn't tell you about it. You have a look of shock. Maybe it's a day where something breaks and you just can't believe that something went wrong like this. Or maybe it's a day where hardware fails or your deployment doesn't work the way you want it to and you're just really, really upset. This could be the 3 a.m. call for you. Or maybe it's just a bad day of a different kind, where you seriously broke something, you lost data, you let security go wrong, something like that. All kinds of bad days that we have, and typically they're going to be for one of these two reasons, where it's a lack of preparation or lack of awareness. We haven't anticipated what could go wrong, what kinds of things might break for us, or we just aren't paying attention to our systems. We don't have monitoring set up. We're not being informed of things going wrong before they happen. So, we can't account for everything. We can't prepare for every disaster. You're here in London, I'm sure you don't worry about hurricanes or earthquakes. There's no earthquakes here, right? Yeah. Met a gentleman from Holland, right? He probably worries about water, but you don't have to worry about that here. We don't have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited money. We don't have unlimited time. And we certainly don't have unlimited staff to deal with it. So what can we do? Well, we can't sit and stare at our systems all day. How many of you check backup logs every day? Many of you check error logs every day. Some of you do. You don't want to do that. That's really not something you should be doing every day. I don't want to sit there and stare at my systems for things that are going wrong, because to me it's mind-numbingly boring. Does anybody want this job? This guy over here on the right? That has got to be the worst job in the world, to stare at that X-ray machine day after day, hour after hour, looking for nothing. Because nothing ever goes through that. Really, we want to make sure that we set up monitoring of some sort. And we want to use some kind of automated system. Because I don't want to check logs, I don't want to check backups, I don't want to check that jobs have run. I want something to tell me what's happening, what has gone wrong, or maybe things that I need to be thinking about for the future. And that's the whole idea of monitoring. So what do we monitor? What do we monitor, Neil? Databases are up. Certainly, there's all kinds of things. But really, as much as I hate to just say it depends, it does depend. It depends on your environment, what you've got going on. If you don't have always on, you don't worry about that. But if you have reporting services or SSIS, you may monitor those things. Ideally, though, you monitor whatever you can, whatever is appropriate to your environment. The things that are important to your particular situation, the things that go wrong or that you have had problems with, those are the things that you want to set up some sort of monitoring thing. And there's a whole list of things that you can look at here. Some of them are very simple. Maybe I want to know if backups work or what my disk space is. Some might be more complex. Do I worry about latency and replication? Or do I worry about how many VLS I have on my system? Those are not the kind of things that I want to check on a regular basis, but I do want to be aware of what's going on. And I want the system to tell me when something isn't right. So let's imagine you're sitting there at work one day and you have chat up and somebody says, hey, I need you to delete an order. Maybe it's somebody in your order department or customer service, maybe it's a developer, maybe somebody else. They send you a quick note. So what do? Well, we go and we write a little script, of course. We highlight it and we run it. So what happens? I've had this happen. Has anybody done this? Probably some of you are lying. I've done this multiple times. It's hard to say. So what do we have to do? Typically right after this, my phone rings, and I get a call and says, I think something's not working correctly. Of course, hopefully, I'm already aware of this situation. The last thing I want is to be blindsided by that kind of mistake. Hopefully, I realized when I ran it that I made a mistake. But I want to be aware of what I'm doing. And at this point in time, this is a saying I've used for a long time. You only need one of these things, but you better have one. Okay? Hopefully you have both, but you better have one. So, first bad thing, I think backups are the basis for DBA. That's the first thing you have to set up. If you start a new job, if you come to a new situation, get a new server, you have to have backups. I don't care if you lose data, I don't care if you delete data, I don't care if you have proper security, anything else. If I've got the data, at least I can move from there. So I have to have backups set up. Because the last thing I want to do is delete that data and get to this point where my monitoring system tells me we never set up a backup on this server. I've had this happen so many times to me because a sysop or a developer creates a new database and they never, ever, ever set up backups. So, what can we do? We want to monitor our backups. These are the kinds of things I monitor. I always alert on backup failure. If a full backup fails or a log backup fails, I need to know right now. That is worth me getting out of bed for, because if I have a problem, I have to be able to cover that data. So on backups, I always alert immediately. Now, if somebody sets up a new database, I don't necessarily get out of bed or come off a date or come out of a movie or anything else. But I do need to know that if a certain number of days pass, that backups are not set up, and I need to make sure that they're set up. In terms of other items here, the test restores, one of the things I've always done is have a process in place that takes backups every day and restores them to another machine. Typically, I do a round-robin fashion so that I restore backup, run a DBCC or other check, and then I delete it, and then I go through and restore the next one. If that fails, I need to know that it fails. I don't need to know immediately. I don't want to be woken up at 2 a.m., but I do want to know that this process is not working, because every day that that doesn't work, that's increasing the risk that I'm going to lose data. The last thing I want to do is lose data. And the last thing I'll say is here, the last two items, I trend these. I don't alert on them. I don't really care if they change, but I do want to know things are happening. If backups are running slower, could be a few things happening there. Number one is, I could have a backup that never finishes. I could have a process that gets stuck. This will help me catch that. If I have issues with my storage subsystem and it's taking longer for some reason, maybe I have contention on those runs, this will help me figure that out. And then the very last one, this is my data change. This lets me know how fast data is changing in my system. And so I can plan for the future and I can extrapolate things. So let me skip over here. I actually have been running some backups on this system. Here's SQL Monitor, for those of you who don't know. This is one of our Rig products. I have this custom alert in here, this custom metric that's trending my backup. So these I was running within a short period of time, but over time this allows me to just keep an eye on what's happening in my data growth. Typically it always looks like this, it never goes down. I don't know if anybody has databases where we have less data every day, but for me it's always going up. So I want to trend this so that I'm aware of how many days I have or how long before I have to request more space. The other things I want to know that I've got backups running. So I want to have alerts, like this alert that says, has a backup been run in this database? Now this is a default in SQL Monitor. We set these up automatically so that we look for log backups, full backups, disk space, all kinds of things, so that I'm aware of what's going on. And if something isn't run, I can go ahead and get a notification here. In this case, a low notification after 7 days. Now I would probably actually set a high notification at 7 days and a low notification at something like 2 days. But I want to know at least that something is being run. Skip out of here. All right, so number 2. How many of you run out of space on a machine? How many, so you have developers, how many of you run IIS and run out of space on a machine? That's never a fun thing. That's the second thing I would say is a DBA, because this will affect backups. It can certainly affect my server and log and everything else. And really, to me, space is a really low bar of things to check. It's embarrassing professionally when you run out of space on a machine. especially when you don't know what to do at that point in time. If I run out of space with my log files, I can't run anything on the server, I can't change data at all. If I run out of space with my backup files, I could certainly get to the point where I haven't had a backup for days and days and days. And then obviously I don't want to run out of space with my data files as well. So what do we check for space? I have some alerts here. I always want to know how much space is in my data files and my log files because I may need to grow those, I may need to deal with that. I also do worry about temp DB. This is a good indication of what's happening in my workload. If temp DB space goes up, a lot of times that can be an indication that I'm getting code deployed in production that isn't written well because I'm using more temp DB space. These are trends that allow me to be proactive and know where to focus my time. Now, obviously, I need to have disk space and my backup space as well. Now, here's a trick that I've used. I got this when I worked in a large enterprise. We set up these placeholder files. So this is These are just simple 1 gig random files. There's nothing in here that's special. But it's a file that takes up 1 gig of space on this drive. And if I get to an emergency situation, my log fills up because somebody turned off log backups, or they've created a database, or some process has run away, I can delete this file and I have 1 gig of space. If you've ever run out of space, how do you know what to delete? What do? You run the little disk cleanup wizard, or you run something like this tree, and you get a list of all the files, and you have to make a decision of what to delete. Start with the MDS. That's what Neil does. Neil's currently unemployed, but he's looking for work. You need to know what to delete, but in an emergency, it's hard to decide what to delete. You certainly don't want to make a mistake. Having these files has saved me and our operations teams many times. We just delete these files. The other thing we do is we have a job here. So that if I am not at the server, if I'm out at a movie, I can call into the machine, into SQL Server, run a job, and have it free up space for me right there. I don't have to get to the Explorer. And let me show you how I do this. So I've got, actually, let's look at our system. I've got these placeholder files. These are just 1 gig files, and I just copy them over. And then I have a job set up, and it's a very simple job. I've named it admin so that I can look at it. It's got 1 step in it. This 1 step is a simple PowerShell script. Now, there's many other ways you can do this. I've actually got this code up on my blog. You can look at it. But all it's going to do is delete a file. So if I run this, let's run the correct one. Let's do this so you can see. I've deleted a file. This has worked. I've deleted 1 file. If I run it again, it'll delete a 2nd file. And all it's doing is looking for one of those files, doesn't care which one, delete the file. The 2 gig of space back. Matter of fact, I did this on my laptop. I have 5 gig worth of files on my laptop so that when I get that message that says my disk is full and I'm 2 minutes away from presenting, I can just delete one of these files so everything doesn't fall apart. And when I fix the problem, I can very easily put these files back. I can do this. Now, certainly doesn't matter what I name them. I just do this so that I can keep track of stuff. But I can have these files. There's actually a utility from Microsoft, contig.exe. You can download it from systemkernels at TechNet. You can just specify the size of the file. You create make files, gig files, whatever you want. You just run it, and then it'll create those files. And then when I have space issues, I just go on. Now, same thing happens in Monitor. I do have alerts set up by default that will let me know what my space is. In this case, I'm not looking for a growth, I'm looking for a decrease. So I have it set up by default at these values, which I can change for whatever is appropriate for my environment. Depending on how fast your system may grow or your workload, you may change these to different values. But you can set these up on any kind of way you want. Right? You don't have to use Monitor. You can do this with PowerShell. You can do this with T-SQL if you really want to. Any number of ways you can do it, but you want to keep track of your space. Any questions? Where's Bill? Yes, sir.
Could you make the Monitor, when it's giving you a warning about the low space available, actually delete one of the files automatically?
Could I make Monitor actually delete one of those files automatically?
So it would delete the file, free up some space, and let you know at the same time that you need to get in there and check out why it's running out of space.
Yeah, so I don't have a way to do this directly, but I could set something up, because what I could do is set an email to go to a group and have it come to me and to another process through something that picks up that email and then runs a job. So I could do that as well. I hesitate to set those automatic things up, because the last thing I want is accidental problems, like that fills up quickly and then somebody deletes something like an import process and it starts deleting my placeholders, and then then it won't happen. So you want to be careful about that. The other thing is you don't want a runaway process to cause a deletion of a file and then continue to run away and delete another file and run away. So that type coupling sometimes causes you problems. But certainly you might have, maybe you have two sets of placeholders, one that we automatically delete and one set that are for administrators only. Okay. Anybody else? Good. How are we doing on time? Not bad. May finish early. All right. Unauthorized access. Security is more and more important all the time for all of us. These days, I think it feels like every week we have the announcement of some sort of data breach. I don't know how that is over here, but in the US, it seems like some large company every couple of weeks is announcing that your credit card has been stolen. And so I just have a point that I'm going to replace every credit card every year because they're falling apart. So, third day, you got to avoid security issues. You want to keep track when things happen. Now, certainly I might want to know about any kind of rights change, any permission change, any grant, revoke, or deny that's changed on my instance. But I certainly care about sysadmins. I've worked in far too many organizations where everybody has sysadmin access. For developers, how many developers have sysadmin in your production systems? Hopefully you use that wisely. Grant will tell the story that he's worked in organizations where everybody in the company has had SA access to the server. Hopefully that's not SA in blank password, but they have access. So what can we do? Again, this isn't something that I necessarily want to alert on. It may or may not depend on my organization, but I do want to track what's going on. Now, we have this site in Reddit we put up called SQL Monitor Metrics, where we allow people to put up queries, things that they need to monitor that they find are valuable, and then they can share them with anybody else, and you can download these. This one is by David Heath. And if I implement this, what happens is I can set up an alert for any kind of issues. So I've got all these custom metrics set up here. I have a few. As a matter of fact, actually this won't connect, but I have this principles of sysadmin that came right from SQL Monitor Metrics. And it's just a simple count that's reading through some DMD to let me know how many people have access at sysadmin level. And what happens is, I don't care how many people have access, but what I actually do care about is I care about the change. So I'm using a calculated measure here. So if there are 12 people with access today, I don't care. I don't want to trend 12, but I care if it goes to 13, or I care if it goes to 11. Because potentially, I either have somebody making changes I'm not aware of, or I have unauthorized access through some kind of SQL injection or hack that's making changes as well. So with this, I can see what's going on. And I can trend this and keep track of it like any other metric I have. So if I look at my particular server here, and I scroll down, I have, at the bottom here, all these custom metrics. And so one of these is looking for people with sysadmin access. I can certainly modify that to check any role that I want, any custom role, anything in my database, or anything in my server. But in this case, when I look at that metric, it tends to trend at 0. But let's add a sysadmin, and hopefully this works. So maybe SQL injection, make a quick access, and what I should see in a minute, everybody cross your fingers, is that this will track to 1. So I've had a change from the previous value to 1, and then I can obviously have this alert me, send the page, anything that I want to do, and then let me know. While I'm waiting for this, anybody have questions? We understand? Nothing major here. These are simple things you can do, but they make a big difference. on. This is bad when it doesn't work. Oh, I'll go back to this for a minute.
Steve, it's your timestamp at the top.
My timestamp?
04:54, 25 minutes.
Yeah, so that's Denver time. That's the real time. Not quite California time, but it's close, right? But I can certainly change this as well to cover any roles that I want, or see if anybody's changing access in any of my databases as well as sysadmin. Now, changing access to the databases, I might not have a high alert. I may not want to wake somebody up for that, but certainly sysadmin access, I wouldn't want to do that. Come on. I'll come back to it. Maybe it's checking every few minutes. All right. So, we've got to worry about backup. We certainly have to worry about space. We don't want any security breaches. What about a workload change? What about deployment of code that is horribly written and all of a sudden every query is a table scan and slowing things down? What about somebody in sales sells to a new customer or a new product and all of a sudden we have a huge change in our workload? We run out of resources. Who has never run out of resources on any of their database servers? Always have enough CPU and memory. At some point, we're going to run out of resources. We all know the reason the NoSQL movement has really grown is because relational servers don't scale too far, right? It's a big deal. If I want a new server, if I want more scale for my database server, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of hassle, it's a lot of time. Typically, I have to replace them. So I don't want to run out of resources because all that does is make my phone ring, people are upset, they complain, everything is slow. So what can I do? I need to track my resource usage. And I want to be aware as quickly as possible that things are breaking. Now, I may not, in fact, want to wake up for this. I typically don't. But I want to be aware that things are changing when I come to work so that I can take measures to either retune code, add indexes, or request more hardware resources. So let me look a little bit at CPU load. I have this demo kind of captured this way just because when I change time zones, it doesn't always work well. So here's SQL Monitor running. We actually have a server in Cambridge, here in the UK, at Redgate, that runs our smart assembly system, which underpins a number of our products. And this database is in use for a variety of things. And one of the things that we found is it's very, very heavily loaded, and it's often running low on resources. People in California would use this at times, and we had a complaint that it wasn't running well. And so when our IT staff goes to this dashboard, a lot of times they don't get the complaint right away. So it's Monday at this point in time, we're looking at this recording of data. But they got a complaint that last Thursday things were not working well in California. California's 8 hours behind, so they got a complaint. But what they can do is in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little clock. I can change this and go back in time and look at what monitoring data was recorded back in time. So I can go back to last week and see what was there. And when I do that, what I see was indeed my CPU is pegged here. 100%, it's causing problems. At the time that somebody has told me they had an issue, I can go back and look. I don't need to respond that moment, but I can go back and look at this. So when I dig in, if I scroll farther down this page, what I find out is that I've got all these queries running. They're all hitting my smart assembly database, and they're all taking a lot of time. And as a matter of fact, down here at the bottom, we've got the top user processes in SQL Server as well, and those are all very similar. They're all corresponding to each other. If I scroll up slightly, I actually have wait stats. In this case, my page IO latch waits are high as well. So I'm using all this data that I have and correlating it together and looking at it. And when I'm digging into these page IO latches, what I find is, in fact, the averages are very high. They're taking a lot of time. So my CPU is really high, but I have a lot of these page IO latch waits. Right? So that I have to correlate this data and look at it. This certainly requires experience, requires some knowledge, but I have this data to lead me in the right direction and find the problems quicker. Now when I go back and I say, all right, I know I had this problem, this was Thursday night, let me see if it's a one-time thing or perhaps if it's a repetitive issue. If I go trend my CPU, what I find is this is in fact a repetitive issue. There's actually a build that occurs on this server at this time. So late at night here in the UK, a build is going on. We think that's fine, right? We're asleep, we're done. But people in California that work at our company are still working. This is the end of their day when they're trying to close something out, and they're seeing this same issue. So So we go in and we think CPU, do we need to do anything else, right? I've got CPU high, but I've got page IO less. Does that indicate anything? Anybody comment? Well, if I dig in further and look at other metrics, what I actually find is for this disk drive, it's really low. It's taking me a second to do a write on average. Now, I know some of you are developers, may not be performance tuning experts or SAN experts, but a second to do a write is fairly bad in SQL Server. We actually have contention on the disk that is causing this issue, and that's causing our CPU to rise as well. But having this data trended over time, so not just alerting me that there is an issue, but being able to look back when somebody lets me know of a problem, I can dig in and find out what the issue is. Now here we have to decide, do we move the build to a different time? Do we request more resources? Do we increase the number of disk drives so that we can spread out the load? Any number of things we can do. But having this information means that I can talk to the people that are affected, talk to my managers, and then decide how to handle this and move forward. Any questions? Make sense? No. That's all right. Alright, so some of you developers have SA access, you make changes to production. We have to make changes to production. We talked this morning, we want to make changes fast. We really want things to evolve and change quickly, but we need to know as DBAs when you make changes. Far too often I've had people that make changes without letting me know what's going on, without getting approval or just any insight into what things are happening. And so they cause problems. They cause my phone to ring, or they cause servers to go down. So tracking changes to production becomes a big deal as well. Really, this is an auditing function, but you can certainly use your monitoring to help you perform some of this auditing. This would allow me to know and have insight into what's being changed. I can't necessarily prevent it, I can't necessarily stop it, but I can certainly react to it. And often this allows me to be sure that what I thought I was going to deploy is what I actually deployed as well. So let me look at catching some changes. Now, I've got another custom metric in here that looks for this. Let's see if this actually works. Maybe I need to change this. Let's try that. There it is. So, all right, so my last demo actually worked. You're right, at the time. But I have another metric in here that's called schema modified. And all this is looking for is it's looking for changes to my schema. And it does this in a very, very simple way. So I've got nothing changing now. But if I go look at what this does, I'm actually just going to look at, in each database, I'm going to look at my syste.objects, and there's a change date here. And I'm counting the number of seconds since 1970 as an arbitrary date. And again, I don't really care how many changes have occurred since then or when the most recent changes. I only care that something changes. So by taking this calculation, however many million seconds it is, what I'm actually looking for, again, is did it change? So if it was 10 million seconds since 1970 for the last change, and now it's 10 million and one, I know that something in my schema changed. So this allows me to raise an alert. So let's see if I can make this one work a little bit better. So let's go into this database. Let's just create a table. 25, there we go. I created a table in there. I could certainly change anything else I want to change for procedure. But this table should be in there. Here it is, 25. And if I look at my monitoring system, this would let me know that something changed. So if I scroll down, let me find that alert. Probably need to change this again. Let's go now. Here's a change. Now, I may not have this as a high alert, I may not want to page it out, but I certainly want to know that something changed. Maybe this comes through me as a report every morning and lets me know. It doesn't tell me what changed. I don't know that. And certainly if somebody deployed 5 different changes, all I would have is 5 alerts that said something changed, something changed, something changed. But this allows me to at least be aware of it and be prepared for anything that might go wrong. However, I also have something else set up in here to where I can look at what changed. So I have a change log. You can see Obviously, I've been testing this, but I know right here that something changed in this database. This is the kind of thing that I've often put as a DBA in each database. I build potentially a managed schema, but certainly a managed table where I'm tracking changes like this. So I know what happened, I can find out who made the change, what happened. And I do that pretty simply with a little trigger. You don't have these changes often, but you have them enough that it's worth having this trigger. And this is a fairly lightweight trigger. If you look out on the internet, I'm sure you'll see many similar types of triggers to this. But all it's doing is it's looking for changes to store procedures, tables, views, functions. I could certainly add schemas, keys, anything else that I care about in my particular database. And then when that happens, I'm capturing the event data. So it's looking at the eventing that's occurring in SQL Server that it does all the time. But in this case, I'm just capturing it and sticking it in a table so that I can query it later on. Anybody that's making changes in here isn't aware that I'm tracking this, but it allows me to go back and find out what's happening in my environment so that I have control of it and I know what's going on. Any questions? This code? You know, I don't know if I have this on my blog. I'll make it available though. I'll give that to Carly so she can put it up on the site if you do that. But it's pretty simple stuff. There's nothing magic about this. As a matter of fact, this is based on something I think I saw in MSDN. If you just go look at database DDL triggers, you'll see something similar where all you're doing is the event data here is documented. It's just an XML stream that gets kicked out whenever something happens, and you just have to parse out which pieces you care about, essentially. These are the ones that I'm pulling, but you can certainly pull anything else. All right. So that's really all I have in terms of monitoring. I know it's a little quick, but I think I'm almost out of time here. So if you've got questions, I'll take questions. If not, we can take a break and relax and before the next session starts. But thank you for coming. Hopefully you learned a little bit about monitoring. Hopefully it made some sense to you. And please, if you want to know more about SQL Monitor, ask some of the people up front. Yes?
I'm just wondering how resource intensive the monitoring is, because if you're running profiles and traces on production systems that are already degraded, what's the...
So how resource intensive is the monitoring that we do? Can I defer to Colin? Yeah, a good answer for me. This is Colin. He's one of our product managers.
Hi. Yeah, monitor, it's agentless, and when it's accessing your SQL Server monitoring, it puts a couple of percentage points on CPU. If you turn on trace, that is a bit heavier. I think generally, in fact, I don't recommend running with trace on all the time. Turn it on if you've got a problem that you really need to do a bit more digging into. But that takes it up by a few more percent. So it's designed to be as lightweight as possible.
Yeah. Now it's running SQL trace in the background. It's not like Profiler, but it is just running a server-side trace, capturing data back. Right?
Yeah.
That's correct. Okay. Yes, sir.
Kind of similar question. We're using a different product for monitoring.
Oh, well, see, that's the problem. That product.
It's quite good, but our biggest problem is when, like in the situation where the CPU is pegged, it can't access the server anymore. So we actually have the problem that we can't analyze what's happening because our monitoring tool. So how does SQL, how does the Redgate monitor deal with that?
So when the server is pegged, the monitoring system can't access the server, so it has issues. Certainly that's an issue. We would have a similar issue there as well. Now, if you had trace enabled, either your own trace or our trace, that data would still be captured, and it would be available for review later, but certainly at the point where you're having an issue, you can't do that. You have to be proactive if you're having a regular problem. If it's a one-off problem, there's not much we can do about that. There's not much anybody can do. But if you realize that you are potentially having issues, what I would recommend is that you have extended events tracing going on rather than SQL trace, and you would be capturing that data that you have to review later. When you have the issues, certainly you can connect with a dedicated administrator connection and start to remove processes if you need to.
No, it's more about the kind of then being able to look, because you have a problem overnight, like you suggested.
Yeah, so trace or extended events are what you would really need to do so that that stuff is captured on the server. And I don't think it would ever drop extended events, is that right? Those are always captured.
There's a kind of very slight out case for it, but probably you will never come across it. So
yeah.
extended events is all I can see capture everything and put it into into targets like ring buff memory or to synchronous file targets.
All right, so Neil's an MCM. He's a smart guy that asks questions too when I need answers. Extended events, he's saying, is if you capture the ring buffer and write it to either a file target or...
Yes, if you write an actual file, you actually go back and
go back and look at it.
From another server and actually access that file. You have to do monitoring of the other server as well, so we're going to try and capture the information. But it's the ring buffer, you need access to the server.
All right, so you need access to the ring buffer on the server. I mean, when the server's pegged, the server's pegged, and you may not necessarily want to kill processes. You may want to let it run so that you understand the duration of the issue or the workload. But you do need to capture that information so that you can make decisions later about how to deal with it. I think if we dropped Colin, we wouldn't be able to pick up any of that information for that period of time because we are connecting to the server as a client. You know, so that we don't have an agent on there. We're just connecting as a client. But you would still have the trace data if trace is enabled. What else? Yes, sir, sorry.
We at SQL Monitor.
Good job.
We can only access it internally.
Okay.
So I was wondering if we were going to put it publicly accessible so we could get access from home, not being a DBA. If someone got access to it, how much damage could someone do?
If somebody had access to your SQL Monitor data because you put it on a public URL, how much?
I had it on my phone got stolen or something like that. How much damage could someone do?
How much damage can somebody do? It's hard to say. I mean, there's nothing in Monitor that you can perform as an action, right, that would actually affect the server. All you can do is read data, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could write an insane custom method that did a denial of service attack, as it were, you know, result to.
Yeah, so that would be interesting because you certainly could. That's something to think about. I wonder if I could. If I needed to create a custom metric.
You would know schema, and you might not want to have it.
Yeah, so you would certainly know server name, database name, schemas, pathing, things. If I was going to create something here, potentially, right, I could do this, right? Right, and I could do that. Could I do that? Where'd my I lost Colin. Oh. Could I do this? Could I do that?
I need to go and check because I know we've done security assessments before my involvement in Monitor, so I'm pretty sure we're safe.
Yeah, and so potentially something to do it, but you can make stuff read-only. So what you could do is have accounts outside of your organization that you use on your phone or your laptop or your wealth that are read-only accounts, not administrative level accounts. So you can do that. Certainly we do expose stuff here. Let me connect to the network real quick because that'll be that. We expose the SQL Server Central stuff. Let's connect. What was it? Range SDB, is that right? No, don't do that. We'll see if this connects actually. So at monitor.redgate.com, this is in fact data from our cluster. So down here, somewhere in London, we have our Rackspace. This is actually our machine name, our host name, and our instance name. This isn't directly on the server. We replicate to another server just for performance reasons. But you can see we've actually got this community server here. This is running SimpleTalk, the community server. But this instance is running SQL Server Central. When it comes back up, come on. Well, let's. Apparently our pipe isn't as big as I thought here. Monitoring stop. Monitoring stop. Because this is probably the passive node. In any case, this is actually real data that runs SQL Server Central and SimpleTalk. So anybody that goes and looks at this, and we haven't had an issue, we've had this exposed for 3 years now, Colin, 3 years, 4 years? Yeah. We've had this up there a long time. And so this is delayed a few minutes, but this is live data. You know, so depending on your situation, you have to decide. I would certainly just think about read-only accounts maybe on your laptop, your phone, your tablet, whatever like that. Okay? Anybody else?
How does it actually connect to your phone? Is there an app on your iPhone or something? Or?
This is just a web browser.
Right, so it's just through the browser.
Yeah, just through a
There's
browser.
no automatic alerts through an app or anything?
So how do we automatically alert? So we integrate with some of the pager software that's out there, but we can just do an email send, an SMTP send. So you just put in your configuration settings and say, I can't see it here, but if I were to come into the configuration here, I can just set up 4 SQL Monitor that I want my email settings up here. Right, and I can just configure any SMTP server that I've got available in my organization, right? If I have credentials that I need to supply, I can just supply those as well. All right, and then we do integrate with PagerDuty here. So if you have PagerDuty running on as a process, that will do alerting to pager the phones or whatever. Okay.
Can you
Yes, sir.
generate SNMP traps?
Can we generate SNMP traps?
Not yet.
Not yet. Nobody uses that stuff anymore. Yes? So if I have SQL Server set in different domains, how does this work? It works just like any other client connection to SQL Server. So we're making client connections just like you would for SSMS or from some other application. So you just need the connectivity for however you configure SQL Server. So 1433 or 1434 or whatever browser port you may need to allow dynamic naming. Anybody else? Good? Yes, sir. You had to have the last word, didn't you?
If I wanted to have the same shirt as you, what should I do?
Same shirt?
Yeah.
Beingteacher.com. So if you go out here, come on. Sorry, I was zooming in here. There you go. They've got the great shirts. Anything you need. Anyone else is just a couple minutes. So that's all I have for this presentation. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Again, please talk to people out there. Take a break. I need a few minutes before I have to go over there. So thanks for coming to SQL City. Have a great day.